everybody, and welcome back to Pediatric Therapy Essentials. I'm Dr. Heather Sossaman, and I'm a pediatric physical therapist. Well, in this week's video, we're going to be talking about a topic that I think is incredibly interesting, and that is graded control or force modulation. So, stick around. Hey guys, and welcome back. I'm really glad you could join us this week for our discussion on graded control and force modulation. So graded control is our body's ability to use the correct amount of force to complete a task. So if we're trying to pick up a paper cup full of water off of the kitchen counter, if we have the correct amount of graded control, we'll be able to pick the cup up and bring it to our mouth. But if we don't have the right amount of graded control, we might squish the cup, knock it over, or completely miss our mouth in the process. Now, I know this is going to come as no surprise when I tell you that graded control is a skill that children learn during development, and it's learned through lots and lots of repetition and practice. So if you've ever been around a baby and they have their first sippy cup and they're getting ready to take a drink, usually their parents have to put their hands up to make sure that that baby doesn't take that cup and slam it into their little face when they're trying to take their first sip. And that's because they haven't yet learned how much force it takes to bring the cup to their mouth and take a sip without missing their mouth or smashing their face or not quite getting it to their mouth. And that is what graded control is all about. And you can also see this when babies do things like stacking blocks. If they don't have the right amount of graded control, they might knock the whole tower down while they're trying to stack their blocks, or they may completely miss the stack entirely. Now, there are lots of different reasons that kids can have difficulty with graded control or modulating force. And a few to consider are first, sensory issues. So if a child has difficulty processing the sensory information that they receive from the environment and using that information to perform a purposeful task, then graded control or force modulation is going to be really difficult for them. So if I'm outside playing on the playground and I see my friend kick a ball to me, but I can't really judge how fast that ball is coming towards me or the direction, and I'm not really sure what to do with my body in order to kick it back to them, then having the ability to kick it back with the right amount of force is going to be really tough for me. Second, we need to consider musculoskeletal considerations. So do the muscles in my body have enough length? Are they flexible and movable enough to complete the task? And are they strong enough to complete the task? Do they have enough strength? So if I'm trying to pick up that cup of water we talked about off the kitchen counter, but my muscles are too tight to get there, then graded control isn't really an issue because I can't even move my arm that far to get the cup. Or if my core muscles are really weak, I may not be able to hold my body in a good enough position to try to even work on graded control in my arm. And the third thing we have to consider is practice. Has a child had enough opportunity to practice and explore their environment in order to learn about control, force, and grading their movements? If a child has a medical condition that prevents them from moving a lot, this could impair their graded control. If a child is developmentally delayed because maybe they were born early and had to spend some time in the NICU, their graded control could be impaired. Also, spending too much time in front of screens or not spending enough time in free play can affect a child's ability to develop their graded control. Because practice, 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 and exploration is what gets us there. Okay, so now that we know what graded control is and we know how deficits in this area can come about, let's talk about the fun stuff. And that is, how do we work on this skill with kids? Well, there are lots of different activities you can do, and I'm going to go through a few big categories for you and give you some quick ideas. So the first area we might want to work on is increasing a child's body awareness, or their ability to know where their body is in space. Because if I don't know where my body is, then it's going to be really difficult for me to figure out how much force to use to complete a task. Now, I have an entire video on this topic if you're interested in it, and I will link it up above. But the simplest technique to use to work on body awareness is something called heavy work. Now, heavy work is any activity that involves pushing, pulling, or pressing things together. And heavy work is important because it activates cells in our muscles, joints, and tendons called proprioceptive cells. And these special little cells help our body know where it is in space. So some simple heavy work activities can be anything from playing with Play-Doh, pillow fights, pushing a laundry basket with books around the house, washing a window, or wiping off the counter. And if you prefer exercises, things like planks, push-ups, and the Superman are really great options. I have a follow-along video for heavy work activities, which I will link up here and in the description box below. I also have a free printable with a whole bunch of heavy work activities that I will also leave for you in the description box. So now that we know where our body is in space, we can get on to practicing some of those graded control skills through games and activities. Now, I like playing board games, so things like Jenga, dominoes, Don't Break the Ice, and even Operation are really great games to work on graded control, especially in our arm and hand. Another great activity is using the zip ball, and I've talked about this in other videos, but in order to get that ball to go back and forth between the two individuals playing the game, you have to use the right amount of force. If you don't use enough, then the ball stops halfway down the line, or if you use too much, you slam it into your partner's hands on the other end. Another great activity is prone or on your belly on a scooter board. And if you do that and you ask a child to follow either a line you draw with chalk or using painter tape on the ground, you're going to get them to really focus on that graded muscle control. Because having to follow that line really requires that they focus on how much strength and the direction that they're going to stay on the path. So there's lots of great ways to work on graded control in the kitchen. So pouring liquids into measuring cups. If you want to get exactly half a cup of water, then you have to really control how much water you're pouring into the container. And if your child has difficulty seeing the lines on the measuring cup, you can use a simple piece of painter's tape to show them how much water to fill. The same thing goes for dry ingredients like flour and sugar. Getting the right amount into a measuring cup is a great way to work on graded control. You can also try mixing batter, right? If you don't use the right amount of force and you have a bunch of flour and sugar in a bowl and you mix it, everything is going to go flying everywhere. So you have to force yourself to concentrate on how much control, force, and movement you have in order to keep the batter in the bowl. You can also work on loading and unloading the dishwasher. If we put our cups and plates in the dishwasher too hard, they're going to clang around and make noise, telling us that we use too much force. The same thing goes for when we put them in the cabinet. Now, if you don't want all your dishes broken, you might want to start out with plastic until your child gets the hang of it. We can also do things like play makeup with our child, right? So putting little colors all over our face and eyes. If we use a lot of force, we're gonna get a really dark color. If we use a little tiny bit of force, it's gonna be really light. Now, I am a PT, so I have to give you some gross motor ideas as well for graded control. So throwing, catching, and kicking a ball are all great ways to work on force modulation. So if my partner is standing 5 feet away from me and it goes to catch the ball I throw, if I don't use enough force, it's not gonna get all the way to my friend. And if I use way too much force, it's either gonna slam them in the chest or go flying past them. And I've also talked about this activity a couple times in other videos, and that is kicking items off of either cones or upside down plastic cups. So if you put something like a ping pong ball or a bean bag on top of a cone or an upside down plastic cup, and then ask a child to kick off only the ping pong ball or bean bag from the cone, they're really gonna have to focus on the amount of force that they're using to complete the task. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video on graded control and force modulation. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please remember to subscribe to this channel. Now, all of those videos I talked about and some of those free printables that are available for you, I will put in the description box below. All right, I hope each and every one of you has a wonderful week, and I will look forward to seeing you next Saturday. Bye.